Welcome to the Mid-Am Podcast. Just Tyler here right now. While I was editing the episode, I realized that we did not record an introduction, so that's what this is. Nathan and I sat down with a buddy of Nathan's, Kyle Redding, who's a good player up in Alaska, and we just kind of chatted about everything that comes along with being obsessed with golf and the grind to get better, but having to live that mid-am life and balancing things like being a father, a husband, and having a job. So this is our interview with Kyle Redding. Enjoy. Well, yeah, and just to I think the idea is, first of all, hello, nice to meet you, Kyle. I'm Tyler. We don't know each other.
Yeah.
But Nathan mentioned that you'd be a great person to talk to as it relates to, kind of what we're talking about and the things that we're interested in. I think one of the things that we wanted to try to do was as much as we want to highlight and bring on experts, at much higher levels than we even aspire to be, to try to glean, as much information and knowledge as we can. Like, we also want to talk to other people that are kind of like us, that maybe most people wouldn't really know, it's in the same way that, in the grand scheme of things, people don't really know who we are. But it's more or less just to highlight other folks that are like-minded, that are, have a similar relationship to the game that we have, and just kind of chat and just, get to know you. And, in doing so, potentially, glean some of that same type of information that we like to get from teaching pros and things like that, but from someone who we can relate to, on a peer-to-peer level, which we feel is a little bit unique to what other folks are doing in the golf podcast space. So thanks for that. That's all to say. Thanks for jumping on. We're excited to talk to you.
I love the grinder aspect of golf. And so that's where Nathan and I kind of always, I feel connected out of our friend group from golf trips. Is it's a special type of person. There's, the guy that drinks on the golf trip and just does that to have fun. And then there's the guys that are like, I'm gonna freaking get better. And I'm never going to be on the PGA, but that's not the goal. It's a kind of your own self battle. So that's what I love, that stuff. And that's kind of the world I'm into.
Yeah. It's probably the worst thing to do on golf trips, but Kyle and I usually at some point are talking about some swing instruction YouTube video or something like that. So it's, we're geeking out over stuff. Yeah. So anyway, tell us about yourself. Who are you, Kyle?
I'm Kyle. I live in Anchorage, Alaska, which is kind of unique for the golf world, I would say. I'm a boring 9-to-5 financial analyst, and I do some side hustling with video work and photo that kind of stemmed from the golf world. And I'm a husband, dad, all those things. And at the very end of the day, I'm a grinder. I think I'm a true grinder when it comes to golf, because my definition of that is somebody that has a ton of priorities, but still thinks that they can get better at golf, even with 1,000 other things that are more important, but you always leave room for that, for the grind.
Yeah. That's right at home here with us, and as we've kind of created this identity of what is the mid-am, persona. It's, it's not the guy who's either in college or fresh out of college and has all the time in the world to just kind of do whatever they want, play a ton of golf and have no commitments. But we're also not crossing our fingers for the senior tour yet. We're in that limbo where it's like, well, I have a job, I have family, and I also spend every iota of time I can thinking about the game and how to get better and working at it. So you're one of us for sure.
There's many of us.
There's many of us. Yeah. So how'd you get into golf?
Yeah, kind of it's not really unique or weird, but it was a neighbor that actually got me into the game when I was probably 14. Him and his dad always were swinging in the yard and playing little chipping games and stuff. And I came out there and I was always a baseball player. And I thought that was where my calling was. And I'm left-handed and they only had right-handed clubs, of course, like most normal people. And so I'm got a right-handed club and I'm trying to like figure it out. And I'm like, this would just be so much easier if I could just hit it left-handed. So went to a garage sale, picked up kind of like a persimmon wood 3-wood, $15. I don't even remember what brand it was or anything, but I just remember this was like old man club for sure. And I got myself some wiffle balls and I just started like cracking them in my yard. And I was like, this is kind of like baseball, but the ball's not moving. This is awesome. This is so much easier in theory. And we got obsessed with it. We started like my dad loves to keep an immaculate yard. And as soon as I got like an iron, divots everywhere. And I mean, he was pissed constantly. Like, just love mowing the yard. He's like, Kyle, I see you've taken 47 divots out of my beautiful yard. And I'm like, that's a neighbor kid, stuff like that. So we got wiffle balls and we built kind of like a course around our kind of like a 5-house loop. So we made a 9-hole little course with these wiffle balls and it like kind of took off with some of the neighbors would come out. Like even the older guys would be like, this looks kind of fun. And, you'd have to hit across the street, which was a water hazard. And, you have all these different things where we just like kind of fell in love with that aspect. And then I got to go on a real course and it just kind of developed from there where I thought about golf all the time. I was a decent player in Alaska in high school. And by decent, I mean, I could break 80. And I had the dreams of going to college, playing all that stuff. And I got my dreams absolutely shattered talking to a coach who basically said, if you're not scratch, don't even bother coming. And I was like, fair enough. I mean, I needed that, ego check because I think most kids are like, I'm a couple steps away from the PGA Tour, a couple good years, when in reality it's astronomically difficult to get there. But I took a long break from the game, actually, kind of through college, probably age 20 to like 25. I didn't even hardly touch a club. It was more of a, if everybody else is golfing, I'll golf maybe 3 times a year. And then I just found a passion for it again around 24, 25. And it's like, I think about this game an unhealthy amount. Like I don't know what it is. I do know what it is. It's unbeatable. It's beautiful. You meet a lot of people. Like there's a lot of good things to it, but I can't like peg it to like, do people feel this way about, pickup basketball games or like flag football with their buddies? It's like, I never hear that comparison to like what golf is to a lot of people like us. So that's kind of led me to where I am now, and love the game. Even though it's snowing outside, I still think about it. It's one of those things.
Yeah. It's awesome. I didn't know that. That's cool. That's a good little story. That's like, it reminds me of in Portland now, is it they have the city urban golf league where they just hitting it out of the middle of the street.
I know.
That's pretty wild.
They make like the special, like, what was it? The guy, I want to say it was like Tiger Woods was kind of his name on social media, but he was like in New York City playing like
Tiger Hood. Yeah.
Tiger Hood. That's what it was. Yeah. And I mean, I saw that. I'm like, that's cool. I think depending on how extreme people take this, you're going to have a ton of broken windows on businesses. If you start playing with,
they use phone balls.
Yeah. I've seen people using real balls, and like, I'm like, okay, no, that's
no,
extreme for me.
Yeah.
So when you were younger, growing up in Alaska and playing, and obviously you built out that, the neighborhood course, which is, I would argue that's a very unique introduction and kind of relationship to the game early on. Um, it, was it more, you know, out of necessity? Because, like, I guess my question is, like, what's the golf culture in Alaska like? Because
Sure.
that's, what I know of Alaska is for a good portion of the year, the days are real short, and it's kind of, like the ground doesn't really thaw out. So, how does that mesh with a game like golf that is, 100% outdoors?
Yeah, it creates a really, for lack of a better word, a unique kind of culture here because so essentially, yeah, most people just kind of associate Alaska with snowy, cold, winter, 24/7. And yes, it feels that way in the winter months. Roughly October to early April is kind of like winter. But then courses start opening their ranges. There's several local courses, like I think one to five ish within an hour of my house. Um, and so come April, the ranges start opening, and courses take a little bit to get into like peak season. Come July is like usually great, and then we play all the way till it snows. These courses try to like capture as much revenue as possible. Even when the conditions you would be like they should be shut down with frost delays, some courses are just like, you know what, we got to make money now. We'll
Yeah.
risk it.
Hmm.
And so I've played all the way. I've played in December. I've played in uh, usually I get up until late October and then it's kind of miserable to play. But so we have a good season in the big scheme of things. And then, like you said, with short days, when it comes to summer, we have the opposite problem. We have
Yeah.
way
Right.
too much
Right.
daylight. So you can tee off as early as 5 a.m. and you can tee off as late as 10 p.m. And
Wow.
I've played rounds where I tee off at 10, get done at 3:30, and it's dusky. Like it's not dark at all.
Wow.
So you go north, and I had a really cool opportunity with Tom Coyne when he was writing his book, Course Called America. He I got connected with him through somebody, a mutual friend, and he was like, "I'm trying to play as far north as I can for this book," and so he's playing in Fairbanks, which is 6 hours north, like 300 miles north of Anchorage, kind of like directly in the center of Alaska. And we played their military course at 10 p.m. And I mean, it was insane just playing like you would play at probably 7 a.m. in Oregon or something, and just that kind of like light.
Hmm.
And so we have cool opportunities for stuff like that. But I think to
Do the
loop back to your original question is we built that course because we were children, and at that time there was nothing like youth on course. There's nothing
mm,
like those programs because we were kind of late adopters of that. So I could ride my bike to a little 9-hole course that was actually 7 minutes from my house, but I didn't always have $20 or $15 to play when I was 14. And so
mhm.
we kind of did that out of necessity, but then my parents saw that I had kind of an interest, and so I was able to get the occasional $20 bill to go play a course. And they have junior rates,
Yeah.
but I would say, yeah, it was creativity out of the expense of the game, because
Mm,
we all know golf is not cheap. And
Yeah.
right. Right.
luckily there's programs now that I think are wonderful, that I think kids, I'm jealous of some of these kids that
Hmm.
get some of those pricing on some of these courses. So
Yeah. At the same time, though, I feel like, I mean, this is my perspective on your game, but I kind of wonder if there is something you got out of that creativity of like seeing course shapes and kind of imagining it and sort of and gamifying your practice, at an early age out of necessity, that kids who are, they just get carted over to the country club and
for
beat
sure.
balls on the range, like, do you feel like that anything came out of that has
I, I haven't
shaped
really
you?
thought about it like super hard, but like I try to like see where my like golf experience, because traditionally people don't that aren't big time golfers don't love to watch golf on TV because they're always like golf's so boring to watch, blah blah blah. But I was always extremely attracted to watching because this was, peak Tiger. This was all of these things going on. And so I was in that perfect kind of scenario where every Sunday Tiger was on TV, everybody's cheering for him. And I remember I'd come home from church every single Sunday and I would go lay down on my parents' bed because they had a TV right there. And I would like take a nap watching Sunday golf, like coming down the wire. And I was always so mad because I'd fall asleep sometimes before like the final hole. And so I'd wake up after it's over and I'm like, I don't know who won. But I think it did kind of allow me to like envision different things out there because you'd have to like hook your wiffle ball and slice it around like stuff. And I had no teaching, no nothing when it came to that stuff. So it was like trying to generate swings without any knowledge from a coach. You're just trying to use your body to do things. And it's weird. I feel like maybe that has something to do with, I've always felt like I naturally am a creative player. And so that's probably where it stems from to an extent without somebody drilling, this is how you play golf. It was always,
sure,
I'll figure it out because I'm going to hit it over this car or I'm going to break the window, kind of idea.
Yeah. That's cool. So we've talked about, it is winter time. So what kind of things are you doing? Like just right now, you're a grinder. What are you doing to stay sharp?
I am I have a confession. I am definitely a training aids whore. Like I've purchased everything. I've tried everything. I think I have everything to this point. I live in Alaska. We do have the luxury, I should say, of having an indoor practice facility dome. It doesn't have any short game or putting currently. It did have a putting mat, but so it's a double decker driving range to a dome that's about 100 yards deep. And so I've helped them a lot with different things. So I kind of have the luxury of, I wouldn't say unlimited range balls, but to an extent I do. And I have hit tens of thousands of balls in there during the winter time. I mean, I've tracked a lot of it on social media, just me in the dome. And it's one of those things where I think I just am in love with hitting golf balls. Like I don't have to necessarily play golf. I love just being able to take an 8-iron and hit 150 straight shots with it. And just, there's something therapeutic about it for me is what it comes down to. So I'm in the dome, I'm grinding. I got my perfect practice putting mat. I've got mirrors and George Gankis, everything. Like,
do you have the new one, the twist, the external rotation snap thing?
Oh. It comes out December 1st, and we'll see.
Yeah. we like to kind of joke about getting Scooby in at least in our short history as a podcast, but not to disparage George Gankis. I'd take a lesson from him, of course, but yeah.
I know somebody actually that has got a lesson from him, like old buddy of mine that moved to California, and he said his words were, it was the best investment he ever made.
Yeah.
Take that for what you want, but I'd be curious about a lesson just to see what you came out with, just the feedback.
Yeah. I mean, I've watched enough of his like old YouTube stuff too, like when it was like the GG swing tip stuff, and when it was, and like he doesn't always teach the same thing to the same people. It's just kind of it was the the social media grabbed onto the hit stuff, I think. But that's cool. Do you have any like specific practice plans that you like to try and follow, or do you have like intentional structure?
Yeah, I've definitely gotten a lot more serious about my practice now because, like I said, I just love to hit golf balls. And so that in turn can be a negative because you're not working on anything. And like we said from the very get-go is I do have a lot of responsibilities to be a good dad, husband, employee, all these things. So I shouldn't use my free time kind of willy-nilly and just smack balls and not try to at least get better. And so I find myself guilty of that a lot of times. So I've had to really kind of break it down. I've watched videos on like how to have the most beneficial 60-minute practice. And so a lot of that comes into kind of splitting it up to 20 minutes of kind of technical work, looking at the camera, making sure you're hitting certain spots in your swing, or, seeing where you're moving at this day. And then 20 minutes of essential feel play, targets, shot shapes, stuff like that. No cameras involved, just purely almost playing golf. And then kind of the last 20 minutes could be wedges, or it might be a course that I know really well in my head, not hitting the same club twice. So hitting driver, sand wedge. And I typically in the dome like to play fairways on the back of the dome. So if I get in a fairway, I get to use a shorter club for my next shot. And then if I hit that shot, then I get to either hit a wedge or something to a shorter target. So it's kind of some pressure practice, for maybe a lack of better phrase, but splitting it up like that to try to make the most of my 60 minutes essentially.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So you're getting to like be intentional with like, I'm going to take this chunk of time and work on technique, and this chunk of time and skill, and this chunk of time and like gamification and things like that. That's cool. That's better than I do.
Well, I mean, it's so crazy, and we've talked about this many times offline, is that it's just some days the feel versus real is so different, even from the next day, versus like maybe you didn't swing for 3 days and then you come back and it's like I got to write down my swing thoughts because I'm like, what was I doing like 3 days ago? I was absolutely peering it, and I almost hit the cement under this mat that I just chunked it. And I mean, it's like, it's such a weird game where you think your swing would kind of stick around, and fragments of it does, but not day to day.
Yeah. But if you filmed it, they'd probably all look the same.
Right. 100%.
Yeah, which is wild. Yeah, I have a lot of I would say I have a lot of like little journals or little notebooks where like the first like 6 pages are filled out, and then after that, and I stopped, and then like I'll come back to them like, oh, that was a good idea, that was a good feel, that was great, and then
it just leaves you.
Leaves you
in my notes section on my phone. Like I just type in swing thoughts in the search box, and like 10 notes pop up, right? And then they're like 2 years ago. Like, think of your hand getting behind your rear hip on it. Like all these feels that I was just like talking through. I'm like, what was I thinking?
Think of the airspeed velocity of an inland swallow.
I'm not far away from like putting the change in the other pocket and like in your hat, blah, blah, blah. So
nice. Good. So you you're one half of a podcast called Go Fix Yourself. So I'll kind of give you a little plug here, but just kind of from my cursory understanding, you guys do a lot about just kind of lifestyle. What would you say? Betterment? No, it's not really, quite right, but
you're pointing out the crux of our podcast, not doing what it's supposed to do, because a lot of times podcasts should have a very clear kind of idea behind it to an extent.
Yeah.
And we kind of jumped around a little bit. We were like self-improvement with like a, sense of humor with it. And then we started really just interviewing people that we thought had kind of like incredible stories about, struggles they face and how they've become a better person because of it, or a topic that they're an expert on that we wanted to learn more about. So kind of fixing yourself, but fixing ourselves, because we claim to not know much, essentially. So it's been a fun little project, because I think podcasting and all this stuff is a great way for networking, and also that's how we consume a lot of our information these days. I mean, you can learn anything about anything on a podcast, just like YouTube.
Yeah.
And you can't do that.
You're kind of an expert by proxy on a lot of different things, then it sounds like. So a little bit of a Renaissance man, I guess.
Yeah, I'd say I know a little bit about a lot.
Cool. Well, how have those things, whether it's like lifestyle or fitness or diet or health and these different kind of other maybe avenues of life and pursuit of uh, improvement, how do those things influence your golf, or how have they?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I'm 37 now. I think yeah, my body just does not work like it used to. And I want to play this game until I die, in theory. And it's like, it's kind of waking me up to the idea of, in the bigger picture is like taking care of your body, your mind, all of these things, because I want to do the things I love for years and years and years to come. And so, like, recently, I've really kind of been gung ho about just mobility, flexibility, diet, and just trying to better myself in a lot of different ways, because I want to improve at golf, but improving at golf is kind of a surface level goal to me. I want to also be, a better husband, a better dad, all those kind of cheesier things to say. But at the end of the day, having your body, your mind, all of these things kind of in order and at their best operating function will help you in every facet of life. And so golf,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, two birds, one stone kind of thing with that. So I've really been thinking about how to better myself without getting super preachy or cringy, and just do the things that are small wins each day so I can play this game and be a better man at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I feel like that's similar to just the game of golf anyway. It's like,
Right.
how can you do small wins to improvement?
Yeah, it all comes kind of, everybody talks about this book, Atomic Habits, and it's a great book. I've read it, but it just talks about kind of the factor of 1% better every day, which doesn't
Sure.
sound exciting or sexy or anything like that. But over the course of a year, then you get to an astronomical increase in how much better you got if you keep doing that. And I forget the math, whatever it was, but it's like, that is so boring and so it's not tempting to me. I want the six pack tomorrow, and I want to
Yeah.
shoot. I want to be scratched tomorrow. I want to be all these things, but nothing that seems like it makes you happy or is a worthwhile goal ever comes immediate. So
Yeah.
I just try to
We
remind.
talk. Yeah, we talk about. I mean, we've talked about in previous episodes, like the Decade. I think it was the Decade app, where we're talking about, okay, well, if you do this one thing, that'll save you
Right.
0.25 strokes
Well, yeah,
around or whatever, and then and
yeah,
like
as you get
those.
better, like we're we exist within the game at a level that's like higher than average, right? I mean, if you're a 5 handicap or below, you're within the top 10% of all players in the world, and then it gets narrowed down. Well, to go from a 5 handicap to a scratch, like you're not talking about cutting strokes, you're talking about cutting tenths of a stroke,
Yeah.
quarter of a stroke on average. And so it's doing all these little things,
Mhm.
that add up to cutting, a full stroke, over the
Yeah.
course of, maybe it could be over the course of 5 rounds, it's not even, in the one round that you're playing with. And so, yeah, I mean, I think like it's another way, what you're explaining seems to me is like another way that golf is such a good kind of like this auxiliary of life itself, where it's just like, you can't go from a 5 handicap to a scratch in one round. Like you have to shave a tenth of a stroke every round for a season, and you can hope, to get there, or 2 seasons. And like that's life. That is
Mm.
like, you can't reach most of your goals by doing this one thing and expecting a result. It's like, no, you got to do these little things
Sorry.
over and over. No problem. You got to do these little things over and
Yeah.
over and over again to
Yeah. No, I mean, it is. Bye.
hi.
Bye.
You see what it's like? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
my life. But you're right. Like, you can't get those immediate results, which makes it also why we think about it so much, because we I think as humans want to not believe that and think there is a shortcut and figure it out. Um, and that's the other thing with like going from 5 to scratch that always frustrates me, because let's say you have a 30 handicapper that gets down to 15. They're most likely never going to go back to a 30. Once you get down to a certain level, you've kind of lowered your ceiling. But going from a 5 to a 3 doesn't mean you won't go to a 4 or a 5 or a 6. And going down to scratch doesn't mean you're just sitting there forever the rest of your life. Like, it's a constant pursuit of par, essentially. And it's like, I always get frustrated because people are like, well, you're basically scratch. And I'm like, yeah, but I could be basically a 5 in a year if I don't play much. You're never going to be a 30 again unless you lost all your limbs, essentially. Like, it's kind of like once you get to that level, I think it even becomes more of the grind, essentially, because you're so close, yet you're so very far. Like,
yeah, I've always called it like hygiene. Like hygiene becomes so much more important when when you get down to like a single digit, especially like low to mid single digit, where it's like you're not really trying to improve your ceiling, you're trying to bring your floor up, and that is so much harder than people, especially people who aren't playing at the level that you're playing at. It's hard for like a 30 handicap or even a 15 handicap to understand what you mean by it's like, no, I know the excellence I'm capable of. Like I've hit some amazing shots in my time, but like what I really want to do is eliminate all of the bad shots, or like take like this, my dispersion on my drives from 60 yards down to 45 yards, so that like I'm putting myself in a better position to have a realistic chance at par. And so like to your point, or what you're talking about is like you can very easily go from a scratch to a 3 handicap in 3 months if like the swing's off or you've lost all confidence with the putter or whatever. And so a big part of what I've been trying to focus on is this idea of like hygiene. It's like every time I go out and practice, I'm like, okay, what are the basic things that I need to maintain so that I don't jump up? I'm at a 4. I'll be a 3.8 tomorrow.
nice.
But I'm at a 4 right now. It's like, I don't want to go back up to an 8. I like, that's my worst nightmare. So like, what do I have to do? And it's not like, it's really not, I need to hit the ball. I need a 180-mile-an-hour ball speed. That would be rad. And I
Yeah.
want that. But like, that's not what I need to
Yes, it
maintain
is.
what I,
Yes, it is.
that's right. Throw it all out the window,
That's
dude.
all that matters.
Better. Yeah.
That's all that matters.
But what I need to do is make sure that my grip doesn't get out of whack. What I need to do is make sure that the way that I address the ball can, maintains consistency and all of those things. And like, that is the boring stuff. And that's the hardest thing that I've personally like, just like remaining engaged with those types of things that are so important. Do you find, especially when you're talking about, a mega stretch of time every year, you're saying October to April, where you're basically playing dome golf. Like, do you find that difficult to, kind of stay on that grind, which is, if it's not fun, like the grind can be very not fun. So like, how do you stay like positive and invested for that period of time when, it's going to, could potentially be 5 months before you step foot on a golf course?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I do try to travel and play as much as I can, a couple trips a year. But what me and a few friends have really fostered the last probably 5 years, and I know this is going to make most people kind of like cringe, is our indoor simulator league. And so sim golf has its own, connotation and negativity. But we play at the dome that we have. There's 6 simulators in there. So what we did was like, hey, we can't obviously play outside. So we built this league, and it's essentially up to every session is about 80 guys. And so it went from 20 to 40 to 60, and there's a weekly skins game. There's, this competition essentially for who's the sim lord. Um, and
I like that.
and
That's
so
good.
it's ultra competitive in a sense. Like you get put into flights. So we try to make it as realistic as possible in terms of like the golf factor that we can, besides it being a video game. But we do sim after dark is what we call it. We go at 10 p.m. During the winter after they're closed, and we get 8 to 16 guys do a skins game, and we just talk trash, and we try to at least keep a competitive feeling and vibe between like the golf community. And because we all just understand, like, a lot of us want to get better and we want to keep playing golf, and this is kind of the next best thing without physically being on the course. So I think I've gotten a lot of guys saying like, man, I feel like I came into the season so much more prep than I ever have, because I kept swinging all winter long into a screen. But I was kind of the gamification of golf, of swinging and hitting at a target and picturing a flag stick out there and putting. And it's you'll pick up some bad habits, but I think in the overall it's a net win to kind of keep that vibe going through the cold months when we're depressed that we can't be out on beautiful courses. So I'm playing Pebble Beach every time. It's like
It reminds me a little bit of, we just talked about the book Be a Player
oh yeah,
last week, and one of the major points that they made is that if you want to improve, you got to do it on the golf course. And it sounds like what you're doing is essentially finding a way to be on the golf course when you can't really be on the golf course, and like that's how ultimately you're able to continue to improve. It's not it's not completely swearing off the golf course and working
oh yeah,
on your P1 to P3, all that stuff. So that's validating to things that we've been hearing from other people, is that like, hey, you got to keep the competitive juices sharp. You got to keep the idea of playing golf and not necessarily golf swings sharp. So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, just to tag onto that, I think there's a lot in terms of like the pressure aspect. You are playing a video game, but the idea of people, we're back to back simulators, so you're watching them hit, they're watching you hit, and if this putt's worth $60 in the skins game or whatever, and everybody turns around and looks at you, and you have a dead straight putt. And I'll just use that as an example, because no matter that it's a video game, it's going to read your face angle on how many degrees open or closed it is, if you pulled it, whatever, or left it short. And so moments like that, I feel like can't ever be a negative when you have to produce something under some sort of pressure. And like I said, it's a video game, whatever. You still have to hit a putt straight. While people are watching. And so little things like that, I think, are what we're talking about, is when you play in a tournament or whatever, you're going to be under that pressure. And it's like, I feel like we spend months just playing with the trash kings. Like you will never hit a shot that you'll never hit a bad shot that you won't hear something about, like, and so that builds up some mental fortitude, I think, when it comes to the game of golf, that you need that, especially
Definitely.
once you get to a certain level.
Yeah. And I mean, the whole video game thing, that's so, people who have a problem with that are just, they don't know. They don't understand. Like, there are so many studies that show that the brain doesn't even adequately differentiate between like visualization and real experiences, which is why so many like mental sports psychologists talk about visualization and why it's so beneficial. It's like you can bank positive experiences and through like really adequate and intentional visualization. Why isn't a video game the exact same thing? You're just using a computer essentially to help you develop that experience in your visualization, and you're actually making the swing or
Oh yeah,
stuff in that regard. I mean, F1 drivers, as their
sure.
kids, they all grow up driving on
Or
simulated
pilots.
tracks and stuff.
Pilots
Yeah,
use. I mean,
yeah,
the correlation between good player. So like in our championship flight for the simulator league, are all the best players in real golf. So
hmm
you could say what you want about you're hitting into a screen, but there if it was just a video game, you would have somebody with a terrible swing playing in the top, and that's just not the case. I
yeah.
mean,
You can't just like backspin, spin, 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 spin,
right,
spin.
and I
Like it's
mean they're accurate to a point, but they're accurate enough that I can use them to get
yeah,
spin, get launch, get base angle at him, like all these different things. So it plays out, I think, as a positive. It's just not real golf, which we all wish we could do.
right, right. One question that we asked each other in some of our very first episodes while we were kind of interviewing one another, and what I think is probably a good question to extend to all of our guests on who are, part of our mid-am family, is as a person with obligations and limited time for practice and restricted ability to play, especially for certain parts in the year, how good do you think you can be at
Hmm.
golf? How good can you get?
Yeah, so this season I kind of finished at like a 1.8, like 2 was kind of where I floated for most of the year. And that's probably about as low as I've ever been. So it's kind of dropped over the last couple of years. I think the level I can get to, I think I can see scratch. I don't see much better than that with
Mm,
life going on. I have a
mm,
3-year-old, almost 4. She's going to probably require a lot more time coming up with sports and all the different things she's going to be doing. So that might eat into some of my practice time. I have a teenager, so I don't know what life's going to throw at me. So I feel like I want to be conservative, even though scratch is a bold statement. But I think that's where I could get to with enough, like you're saying, cutting off those little fractions of strokes and
mhm,
just minimizing mistakes more often. I think scratch is reasonable. Getting to plus, like I don't know that it appeals to me that much anymore. Like it's
mm.
my goal I think is to become a traveling scratch would be nice. Being able to play any course and get to that level. So she wants to show me how to bounce a ball. So as you can see, that's going to eat into my scratch time.
Yeah, yeah. Um, is that like 5 years, and then like, is there more like a long term?
For the traveling scratch, I mean, that's obviously won't be able to play to that level forever. I think in the next 2 years, I would like to be scratch, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I want to maintain that through my 40s. Like that would be kind of the window, and then after that, once I lose distance and mobility in my 50s, I'm just there to have a good time and take some like money and skins games. Like that's kind of my goal.
What
Nice.
what are what are the things that you think you need to improve in order to kind of reach that goal of scratch
Scratch.
slash traveling scratch?
Yeah, like one thing is I need a driver shot that can be a fairway finder. I'm a grip it and rip it as hard as I can generally, and some days it's dead straight, and some days it's duck hooks, and it's just I feel like I'm guessing off the tee, so I lose some strokes there, and then other than that, I think just some short game polishing. Like I'm a pretty decent iron player. I feel like I'm a generally a really solid putter, and so irons, putter, wedges, those are my strengths. If I can just clean it up off the tee more often and I feel like get up and down a bit more. I leave myself too many freaking 8-foot putts that like for par. And it's like, you can't just get it to 3 feet. Like just, a couple more feet and this becomes a gimme. And I just do that too often. When I kind of analyze my game after I play, I'm like, well, I never had to chip, therefore I shot 71. And when I
Yeah.
did have to round with chipping, I shot 76. And I'm like, that's easily the 5 shots right there, most of the time.
Yeah.
So if you give short game lessons, that'd be great.
I
I'm
do.
gonna
You won't like the results, but I
no.
will give you a lesson.
I'm gonna start. I need to give some to Tyler here first. Although he chipped in a couple times in his round today, he tells me, so I don't know.
Yeah, I hit 8 of 9 greens on the front 9, and then I hit 0 of 9 greens on the back 9.
Oh,
But
nice.
I still managed to like
nines.
get. I had what did I have? I had 11 putts on the 11 putts on the back because I chipped in twice, and then I got up and down. I was just getting up and down a bunch, which is not like that is not my strength at all.
Yeah.
My strength is like hitting it straight. But yeah, I'm kind of in a similar situation where it's like if I hit a lot of greens, that score is going to be very good. If I don't hit a lot of greens, it is disproportionately bad because my short game is like such a liability.
I'm a firm believer, and a lot of people probably disagree because I think I'm in the minority, but I am a Texas wedge fiend. Like I would put my Texas wedge against a lot of people's chipping, I feel like, unless the shot absolutely calls for a wedge. But I I just have some sort of weird feel when it comes to like a Texas wedge where it's not even a good stroke, but somehow my body knows how far to hit it. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know how I do it, but a lot of times I'm like, that's just what I do. You
Well,
practice
it's funny too because like that's one of those things that like kind of calling back to this idea of like boring being kind of like the best thing for you when it comes to golf. Like taking a putter off from 30 yards out is like kind of a boring thing to do. It's not flashy. It's just like it's your
Depends.
but like from a statistic standpoint, like it is probably your best bet.
Sure.
It's just it's like it's not that cool little like low driving 2-hop spin stop guy or like a nasty flop. It's not that, but it's like if you just are willing to accept that this is your highest probability shot, like you're going to shoot lower scores. I had a situation today where I drove the ball on 18 up into this hill. And so I had this, probably 20-degree side hill lie. Ball was like 18 inches below my feet. And it was like 160 yards to the over forced carryover ravine. And for a second, I was like, all right, if I just punch up like a 5-iron, I can get it over. And then I was like, no, dude, what are you doing? You're playing for bogey now. Like you hit a bad tee shot, like you get to play for bogey now. And so I like chipped it down and almost made par, but I was so proud of myself afterwards for being like, hey, you did the boring thing.
Hey, way to go.
And that took double bogey out of the equation, and you actually had like a pretty legit chance at par. And so, yeah, for you to say as someone who's like, I as a 4, like sub 2 is where I want to be next year. It is encouraging to hear that like you're just being a Texas wedge guy, like that tells me that you're like, hey, I'm taking high probability shots. That's what I'm taking what I'm comfortable with, and I'm going high probability. And I think like that's the name of the game if you're trying to like truly improve.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think anytime you can get it rolling toward the hole, you have the option, or at least there's the potential that the course can kind of like work for you, versus if you're just tossing it up in the air, where it lands is where it lands, So it's like I've always been like I chip a lot with like 7-irons and 8-irons and stuff like that. My chipping is something I'm usually
wicked. It's real good.
Pretty proud of, but that's because I'm chipping for par. And I've done a lot of scrambling to get up in my life. So yeah, but I also, I'm like the same age, so we grew up and Tiger was on all the time, and that guy, he made the bump and run cool,
Yeah.
So,
and I mean, with his blade, you never see them with, blades generally putting Texas wedge style. Like,
yeah,
I don't know why that is. I think I know why now, because I have a new blade that I've been playing around with. It just does not seem to work well like a mallet does for Texas wedging. And I don't know if it has something to do with the MOI on the club or whatever, cutting through grass or something, but I see why like nobody does that, because it's never a good result that I've ever seen besides VJ.
No.
I like Sawgrass.
Yeah. No, and I think they're, especially on tour, like they're so proficient at using the design of the club and the bounce of the club that, like, if you can use the bounce well, it widens your margin of error so much at the bottom that, like, the reason a lot of people Texas wedge it is because they're like, I'm going to fat this or I'm going to skull it. Well, if you use the wedge appropriately, it just kind of glides.
Well, have you guys heard about this whole spin loft thing?
Yes.
Victor Hovland's coach. So like he's turning the whole chipping thing up on its head with this idea of using the bounce and like striking, like hitting ground first and then ball as like a tool, or that's what separates the pros from us average Joes. And he's coming out and being like, nope, that's 100% wrong. And, this is how you really should be striking the ball for your chip shots. And, and I can't think of a better case study than Victor Hovland, who was, widely known as one of the worst short game players and almost a waste of talent. His short game was so bad. And then now he's on top of the world. So it's funny that you brought that up, but it's like, even, like the technique stuff, it's just wild to me that this day and age, like, we've got, like, we're still like discovering things about the best way to go about playing golf. And that was one that I thought we'd kind of figured it out. Like, oh yeah, no, use the bounce of the club. You've been hearing that for years. And then, this guy comes out, Joe Mayo or something like that.
Yeah.
He comes out and he's like, no, spin loft, man. Like, you need to hit ball first. Like, you 10 degrees down. And it's just like, whoa, that's a completely different story than for what I've been hearing from like Short Game Chef and these other guys.
I mean, that's just, I think that's preference mostly. I mean, because if you go 10 degrees down, the distance between the equator of the ball and the turf is essentially this, because you're coming at that angle, right?
Right.
So it's different for the player. I think the reason I'm more of like a bounce subscriber is because when I want like high spin loft, as in, I want, these are finesse shots, and I don't want like high energy transfer. So I don't want the same spin loft that I would be trying to achieve with like a driver or something like that, where I understand that, like, yes, you're hitting it more in the appropriate location on the face, technically, and you're getting more reliable ball face contact and less like turf potential interaction in between there. But I would say your margin for error shrinks, so you have to be that much better of a player to even choose to play that way, versus guys who are my skill level. Like, I can nip it if I want to, but I don't try to very often, because I want to try and make it as easy as possible for me to get the ball at least on the green and like working towards the hole, versus like bringing in the possibility of laying the sod over it from 2 yards off the green and then having to putt from the fringe or something like that. So I think that's always the conversation. I mean, there's nothing wrong with what he's saying, and there's nothing wrong with bounce. I think it's more, who you're looking at in front of you and who the player is. So
I always look at it as like, what is this coach, like, who is his market that he is kind of like coaching? Like, if you're coaching PGA professionals with countless talent and time and ability, like, yeah, sure, play around with some different techniques and stuff like that. But if you're dealing with a 65-year-old 24 handicap and you start trying to explain, different angles of attack and how much spin he wants to generate, like, I don't think he has the talent nor the time to like learn that aspect. But then you could look at like a Spieth who, from what I understand, and I could be completely wrong, but he uses very descending attack angle on his chipping, and he has hands of a god in terms of like hand-eye coordination. And for me to try to chip like that, I would hit an inch behind it probably every time, and I have to use bounce to kind of mitigate the risk. And so that's where I've kind of leaned towards that style. And it's just, I always kind of look at coaches. I'm like, are they trying to sell me a program, or like, my way's the best, so therefore come take lessons from me kind of idea.
Yeah. I mean, Mickelson has always said, like, I lay it open, I hit the ground as hard as I can behind the ball, and it just bounces up. Well, I mean, I wish I could play on turf conditions like that all the time, but still, I mean, the point remains. So you're wrong. Whoever you are, coach.
Everybody's wrong. Everybody's wrong.
No one's right.
No one's wrong. No one's right.
Yeah.
So, do you have any like upcoming competition next year that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of an epiphany I've had lately. Is I really want to, because I'm going to grind all winter long, just like I have in previous years. And I want to use this year to continue that and play in all the kind of major amateur tournaments here and the big money games that they have, and whatever it is. It's usually about 12 tournaments. And so based on those results, even though this is probably a terrible way to go about it, will determine how much time and effort I sink into golf next winter. If I feel like the results aren't worth the time that I've spent, I'm going to try a different effort amount next winter. Maybe practicing less, maybe not grinding over the swing so hard. So I really can't say what the future is going to be like, but I'm going to basically gauge it off of how I feel my tournament performance was.
Mm-hmm.
So,
if you like crush it in the tournaments, though, then I mean, is there? I hear you. Like, if you don't do so well, like you're potentially dialing it back. Like, let's say you go out and crush it. Like, is there a world in which you're like, shoot, man? Like, what if I dedicated more time to this? Like, what questions does that bring up? Is if you come out and just absolutely light the world on fire in those 12 events.
Yeah, that would just involve taking my wife out on a date and just presenting it to her that I'm going pro. It's easy.
Listen,
we're
Googling
moving.
how to get my tour card.
So Porn Fairy is like this kind of large, like business service conglomerate, and they sponsor a tour. And I think I can Monday qualify it.
I'm pretty sure I need to stick close to the phone this weekend in case I get a call. So,
I'm 171st alternate, so there is a chance.
You could also alternatively just send your results to Live and see what they offer.
Yeah. $7 to, wow. Hey, I guess that'd make me pro getting paid to play golf. So, there's little wins.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I think that we're coming close to, about how much time we'd like to take from you and your family. So, is there anything else you'd like to share?
Anything you want?
Where can we find you? You want to hype up your
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm mostly on Instagram at Kyle A. Redding. Redding is spelled reading, Reading. So that's kind of where I keep track of everything. If you want to go see videos and stuff of all the courses I've played, I make little tidbits here and there. So that's the best place to reach me if you ever want to talk golf grindage and what I love hearing about what people are working on and their goals and stuff like that, because I just think we're kind of all in it together. And sometimes I feel like friends and other golfers just don't get it. So if you ever need a support group, I'm right there with you. So I really appreciate you guys having me on. Like, this has been great. Haven't obviously done a lot of golf podcasts, but this is something I feel like I could talk 3 hours about, just even if we were talking chipping technique, it could go down some scary rabbit hole. So I love what you guys are doing. It's awesome to, be a part of it.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Thanks for your time, man. We'd love to do it again soon. It's the point of this is just for us to like have an excuse to like nerd out. So it's fun to nerd out with other dudes.
When I win every tournament this summer and you guys have me back on, and I decline because I've become too big, I am on the list.
Yeah, we're gonna have to get on and be like, we tried to get Kyle, man. We tried, and he had some words that we can't say on this podcast, unfortunately.
His manager would not respond to any of.
Well, actually, it wasn't even his manager's manager. We couldn't even get his manager.
I don't know if you guys heard, but Kyle took 75th in the Alaska State Amateur, so pretty big. That's what it's probably going to be like. So, all right, guys. Well, appreciate it, and let's get around. And if I'm down there next time, and
for sure,
I'd love to. All right,
take care.